Greetings, fellow artists. In this video, I paint a master copy based on a still life from Paul Cezanne. Because of the color variation and the smaller strokes, this master copy ended up taking me an hour and a half instead of an hour like the previous two. Paul Cezanne was a post-impressionist. Often when people think of impressionism, they think of bright colors, maybe even primaries, laid right next to each other to create a new color. However, in doing this master study, I realized that that's not the case here. Often it's either a color and a grayed down or more brown version of that color, or different hue shifts within the same color. So in the green pair, you might have a blue-green next to a more yellow-green or a grayed version of a yellow-green. It's not just blue next to yellow to create the green. They're actually mixing the secondary colors, but having some variation within that. In more modern color theory, maybe you'll see people put a field of green and then a gray, but that gray is perceived to be different because of what it's surrounded by. One thing I noticed is there's a few places where the strokes are laid next to each other and follow the form, but not all the strokes do that. There does seem to be a directionality to the strokes, almost like hatching, but they don't always follow the form. So first I laid out the basic shape of the objects in a dark color and a dark tone, and then laid the lights over. I do believe that's how Paul Cezanne would have worked, because once you get the lights into the darks, it's hard to go so dark as he did. In the previous two master studies, Feshion's portrait and the landscape by Edgar Payne, I talked about how they both used outline and spots. We also see that here. There's the strong, almost black drop shadow that carves out and pops forward the objects. But in the top right of this apple, we see a dark line as well. And that would be on the light side. So you wouldn't really expect to see a dark line there if he was just showing drop shadows. Now the shadows are fairly flat, almost black, and they have a graphic quality to them. And the contrast of the super deep darks against the lights give a high range of value and really pops forward those objects. And it also gives contrast to the darks being a bit flatter, and the roundness and turning of the form within the lights. There's a good amount of variation in this painting. He has different fruits that he's showing that are different colors, and even within the same fruit, the apples, he has different local colors. There's the more yellow and the more intense orange, and even some areas that are so gray that they might appear blue or might actually have some blue in them. So for this plate, you might think that I'm going too intense with the colors, and perhaps I am, but once the light, which is desaturated, is placed over the top, it really calms that down. But the interest that shows through in between the strokes still comes out. So again, here there's a transition from dark to light, from more intense color to less intense color, and some of it happens quite gradually. So there's not a huge difference between the different parts, but there's enough of a difference that it groups together and it creates interest. There you can see the drop shadow really moving the apple forward off the plate. The drop shadow also helps ground an object, and it gives it a more realistic feeling. It's almost the opposite of in the Matrix, when you're in the white room and you don't really see the effect of light being cast onto something, casting a shadow. It doesn't seem real. In reality, when you have light fall on a subject, your brain sort of knows that there should be a shadow there, especially if there's only one light. And normally we're used to the one light, the sun. So in this pair we see more bluish greens, more gray greens, and they're overlapping over each other a bit. And the darks are, again, really dark. There's some halftone where the lights get a bit darker before it turns into shadow. There is warm and cool within this ground color, not just saturated and desaturated, but actually bluish, reddish, and yellowish tones playing against each other. It gives the painting an energy and interest. In the next video, I'll show a real-time 5-minute digitally painted clothed figure drawing.